Assalamualaikum to our respected lecturer, Madam Salwan, and to everyone present. We are from Group 2, and today we will be presenting our research title, A Contrastive Text and Cultural Analysis of KFC Advertisement in Malaysia and Japan in Television Advertisements. Next. Before we begin, let me introduce our in-group members, which is the first one, LUQMAN bin JOHAN, Muhammad Haris bin ZULKPLI, SYAFIKAH binti ROSLI, NURSYAZWANA ATHIRAH binti RAMLI, and myself, SITI NURAISYAH binti SHAH. Next. So these are our table of contents. So firstly, we will cover the background of the study, followed by the problem statement. Then we will present our research question and objective and discuss the literature review and methodology. After that, we will share our findings, including answering both research questions, and followed by discussion, recommendations, and finally our conclusion. Next. So the first one is background of study. So to start off our presentation, according to Shim and Andrews in 2013, television advertisements are an important tool for brands to communicate persuasive messages. Specifically, they use a combination of language, visuals, sound, and other modalities to influence audience attitudes and behaviors. Moreover, advertisements must be adapted to local custom and communication styles, especially in culturally distinct countries such as Malaysia and Japan. So for example, KFC advertisement in Malaysia emphasize more on family, shared meals, and social togetherness, and they use a playful and indirect language, which reflects Malaysia's collectivist culture. So in contrast with KFC advertisement in Japan, particularly their Christmas campaign, more structured, formal, and ritualistic communication with precise and organized visuals and audio, reflecting the Japanese cultural values. So overall, our studies apply the Yale attitude change model to analyze persuasive strategies and Scollon's intercultural communication theory to understand how culture influences communication in television advertisements. Next.
So for the problem statements, which is bridging a research gap between KFC ads in Malaysia versus Japan. So let's start with a simple observation. So KFC commercial in Malaysia feels very different from one in Japan because we all intuitively know that culture shapes advertising, but our research identifies a crucial gap between in understanding precisely how it works. So while the influence of culture is widely acknowledged, a detailed contrastive analysis between specific Southeast Asian and East Asian markets like Malaysia and Japan is notably they are missing the existing research. So this isn't just an academic exercise, rather it's a significant practical problem that is waiting to be solved. So global marketers, they are operating without a fine-grained blueprint. So what I mean is they lack a clear guide for localizing persuasive message for audience with deeply different communication norms. So for instance, Malaysia culture, they often emphasizes the relational warmth in family and humor. So meanwhile, on the other hand, the Japanese, the communication tends to prefer in ritual light and subtly. So without understanding these differences, these nuances, the campaigns can fall flat. So that's where our study comes in because we conducted a systematic analysis of KFC television advertisement in these two countries. In comparing their linguistic and multimodal strategies to uncover exactly how persuasion is tailored to this distinct cultural response system. So next.
All right, thank you very much, Haris. So now I will be explaining about what are our research objectives and research questions that we wish to complete. So first of all, the research objectives we have two, which are to explore, to figure out what are the linguistic and persuasive strategies used in Malaysian and Japanese advertisements to attract their customers. And the second one is to interpret how these cultural values are reflected in the language used and the visual elements that are used in both countries' advertisements from the television. And the research questions that we wish to answer are what linguistic and persuasive strategies are used in Malaysian and Japanese product advertisements. So specifically, we are trying to find what strategies they use from a linguistic and persuasive point of view. And the second question that we wish to answer is how exactly do these advertisements reflect the cultural values and communication styles of Malaysia and Japan? So obviously two countries with differing cultures and differing communication styles. How is it reflected in these ads? That is what we're trying to find out. Next. So on to our chapter 2, which is the literature review. I will be continuing my part. Next. So one of the theoretical frameworks that we have based this entire study on is the Yale attitude change model. So what is the Yale attitude change model actually? It is a model that was first studied by Hovland and his colleagues at Yale way back during World War II. So this model framework, its main base of ideas is that it mentions that people are more likely to change their attitudes in response to persuasive messages, meaning that once a person hears a message that they're persuaded by, they are more likely to change their opinions and feelings towards something. And it is said in that model that it is shaped by three primary components. What is the source of the message, meaning the person spreading the message? What are the content and the structure of the message, meaning what is the actual message being spread and how it is structured to them? And what are the characteristics of the audience receiving the message? So these three primary components is what the entire model is mainly based upon. Okay, next. So how does it apply to the TV ads that we are looking today, specifically KFC TV ads? Well, Japanese KFC advertisement utilize soft narration, slow pacing, politeness, and ritualistic themes. So like I mentioned earlier, it mentions a lot about the content of the message and how the message is spread to the audience, which enhance persuasion through message consistency, credibility, and subtle emotional resonance. So it involves all three of those main components that I mentioned earlier. And Malaysian KFC ads, on the other hand, typically rely on emotionally expressive language, humor, and family-centered narratives. So all these features of both of these countries' KFC TV ads can be found in Yale attribution model's main components. Okay, next.
So moving on to scholar cultural communication theory. So basically scholar models tells us that communication is never neutral, so it often live on one side or on the other side. So we all operate within a cultural discourse system. So essentially the written and the unwritten rulebook of our culture. So the system made up of our shared values, social norms, communication practice, act, style, and communication styles, also filter. So they dictate everything from how formal we should be to how we define a family. So most importantly, they determine how we interpret a message. So in a nutshell, this will explain how our culture, norms, values, and communication practices directly influence how we interpret any message. So it argues that communication never neutral. So it's always filtered through our cultural lenses. So actually this makes it incredibly useful for our contrastive advertising studies like ours, where multicultural audience from both countries are bound to interpret the same message differently. So Scotland gives us the vocabulary to move from saying these ads are different to explaining why they are different based on the foundational cultural structures. The next. So now let's get a bit practical, like how to apply it on TV ads. So how do we apply Scotland's theory to television commercial? So we focus on three key concepts, which is first the social identity and norms. So we ask the people in the ads shown in as individually or as part of a group or family. So this tells us about the culture's view of the family themselves. So second is the power relation. So we analyze the tone, whether it is informal, friendly, or formal, or even or even respectful. So this reveals the level of authority and politeness that is to be expected from the ads. And last but not least, the third one is the cultural interpretation. So we keep in mind that the same exact scene that say a family sharing a meal can be understood in vastly different ways. So based on the viewer's cultural filter. So applying these lens to KFC commercial reveal a clear and fascinating dichotomy. So in Malaysia, the ads reflect what scholars would call a relational system. So we consistently observe informal language. So our focus on humor and scenarios centered on family and friends. So the primary goal here is clear. It is to build warm interpersonal connections. So the ad even say KFC is about fun and togetherness. So in contrast, the Japanese ad reflect a ritual system which they present it in a polished and more formal way. So they heavily leverage the traditional themes. The most famous example is being the established custom of the Christmas KFC dinner. So the focus isn't just on eating the chicken itself, but rather it's on aligning with the social ritual where eating the chicken on Christmas night, like their norms over there. So the ad says KFC is part of a cherished tradition, which is the same brand, the same product, but it's a completely different persuasive strategy. Next.
Okay, now we are moving on to the contrastive analysis and cultural analysis in advertising. So this part of study focuses on comparing KFC's advertising strategies in Malaysia and Japan. So the first one, we have language and persuasion. So in Malaysian ads, they are informal and energetic and has emotional tone, and they always mix English and Malay words together. For example, sedap gila or crispy and juicy. And also in Malaysian ads, the casual humorous tone makes the brand feel like a friend rather than a corporation. And as for KFC Japan, Japanese ads, they use a serene, cautious and formal tone, and they have short sentences, limited dialogue, and soft narration emphasizing gratitude and also family, aligning with Japan's high context communication culture. And as for the visual and moods, for Malaysian ads, KFC ads, they often use bright, colorful and lively visuals, showing friends and family enjoying moments together with fast-paced, cheerful music. And as for Japanese ads, they, however, are peaceful and cinematic and softly lit. They use peaceful, cinematic, and softly lit visuals. And also, they include minimalist wabi-sabi style and prominently feature anime-inspired elements such as expressive character, emotional gesture, and also detailed background to evoke nostalgia and emotional connection. And last but not least, we have culture and audience. For KFC Malaysia, the ads reflect everyday life, humor, and informal sharing, making the audience feel entertained and connected while the brand is seen as relatable and trustworthy. And as for Japanese ads, it is tied to tradition like Christmas and heavily use anime aesthetic as a main cultural element, and also creating emotional resonance, family warmth, and also a sense of nostalgia, which makes the brand culturally embedded. So that's for the differences between these two ads. So next.
So next one is a review of the previous studies. So firstly, we look at the previous research conducted by Xiao and Wang in 2032, who studied McDonald's advertisement from an intercultural communication perspective. So their study applied Hofstede's cultural dimension theory to examine how advertisements are adapted to fit local cultures rather than being simple translation. So specifically, they found that in collectivist cultures, advertisement focus more on family, community, and togetherness, while in individualistic or short-term oriented cultures, advertisements emphasizes more on leisure, entertainment, and individual enjoyment. Moreover, their study highlighted that cultural adaptation is not limited to language alone, but also extends to gestures, images, and music in advertisement. And effective ads, therefore, align closely with local cultural communication patterns to engage with the audience. So, in relation with our study, Xiao and Wang's work actually provides a useful framework for analyzing KFC advertisement in Malaysia and Japan. While they use Hofstede's model, our research integrates the Yale attitude change model to explore persuasive strategies and Scollon's intercultural communication theory to understand intercultural communication. Overall, this highlights the importance of a contrastive approach and the need for cross-border advertising strategies that are culturally sensitive. Next.
The research methodology that we use to conduct the study. So first of all, what is the research design? The research design around the study is that we used a qualitative method in the collecting of the data, where we compare the type of language that were used in the advertisements, and how both of them aim to reach specific audiences and are trying to portray a specific feeling. So it's something very subjective. It's not an objective thing. It is, what I mean by that is that it's not number based. It's not numerical. It is based on the textual and visual evidence that we collected. So the population consists of KFC television commercials and advertisements that have been created and published in Malaysia and Japan from 2000 to 2025. So we try to keep it relevant, but also try to have a large population so that we can get enough data. So we chose 2000 to 2025 for KFC ads from Malaysia to Japan. And the sample that we chose were 10 advertisements, 5 from Malaysia and 5 from Japan. And we are aiming to achieve balance and adequate representation. So since 5 here and 5 in Japan, we are trying to have comparative analysis that is meaningful and that is as fair as possible. Okay, next.
Okay, now into the data collection. For our data collection process, we followed a systematic and structured approach to ensure that the advertisement chosen accurately represented the linguistic, cultural, and also persuasive elements of KFC Malaysia and also KFC Japan. So first, we used purposive sampling. This means we intentionally selected advertisement that match very specific criteria. We chose 5 Malaysian and also 5 Japanese KFC TV commercial released between the years 2000 until 2025. So each advertisement had to be under 1 minute, officially produced by KFC, and also display clear linguistic or cultural features so that it could be meaningful analyzed. And also purposive sampling is recommended in multimodal and discourse studies because it allows researchers to select content that directly aligns with the study's objective. And also next, we focus on ensuring reliability and authenticity of the ads. All advertisements were gathered from KFC Malaysia and KFC Japan's official YouTube channel to guarantee that the material was original and not altered. We also cross-check each advertisement using online advertising archives to the upload dates, production details, and whether the commercial had been broadcast publicly. After the ads were collected, we move on to data organization. Every single advertisement was downloaded, archived, and systematically labeled based on country of origin, year of release, and thematic content. This classification made it easier for us to conduct side-by-side comparison later during the analysis stage. And also, we then carry out with transcription. We extracted all the verbal elements from each advertisement and also included spontaneous conversation, narrative, voiceover, slogans, taglines, and any written text display on screen. And as for the Japanese advertisement, we added English subtitle to prevent misinterpretation, as this step was crucial for ensuring accuracy and consistency across both country. And then finally, we ensured a collaborative and transparent workflow. All the data, videos, transcripts, screenshot, and all the coded notes were stored in a secured shared folder accessible only to the group members, and this made it possible for everyone to review the same materials, cross-check interpretation, and also maintain consistency in the analysis. And as for the data analysis, to gather accurate insight for our study, we used a qualitative data collection approach focused on analyzing advertisement from two different cultural contexts, which is Malaysian and Japan. So we began with language, persuasion, and culture. And then as for the language, we have tone, diction, repetition, politeness, expression. For persuasion, we follow the Yale attitude change model. And then we follow the source, framing, and the target. And as for the culture, we follow the Collins theory. We focus on the cultural values and communication style. So there are comparison between the highlighted linguistic, persuasive, and the cultural differences. So that's this systematic approach and enabled us to draw clear insight into how KFC tailors its advertising across different cultural contexts. So that's for the data collection and also the data analysis.
Okay, next for research instrument. So our study used a structured research instrument designed to examine both persuasive strategies and cultural communication patterns in advertisements. So we based this instrument on two main theories. First, as we know, the Yale model, which guided us to focus on aspects such as source credibility, message clarity, emotional appeal, and audience orientation. So second one is Scotland's intercultural communication theory, which help us assess cultural values, communication style, politeness, and social roles. So the instrument ensured that our evaluation captured both the persuasive and cultural aspects of advertisement systematically. Next.
Alright, so for the findings for our research question, so what we found for research question 1 was that I found 4 aspects, which was the slogan and catchphrases, persuasive strategy for both message framing and source and appeal, and also directness of message. So slogans, we have the iconic sedap hingga menjilat jari, which is the Malay version. And then in Japan, they don't really focus on specific slogan, but they're more focused on the experience and tradition, which is the perfect treat for your family. It's less about a specific slogan, but more about a specific ritual. So for the persuasive strategy for message framing, for the Malaysian ads, we can see they are very emotional, they are very family-centric and focusing on sharing joy with others, and it puts a centerpiece towards family joy. While Japan is more subtle, is more tradition-oriented to their culture, and is more established around the customs over there, which is like, for example, Christmas. So it's less about obvious excitement, but it's more about fitting into the cultural rituals they have over there. And then we have the source and appeal for Yale model. So the source of the message is often relatable, like as mentioned earlier, it is very family oriented. So the narrator is often somebody who is, for example, a family member or a regular working person, shown in joyful moments, and it is trying to attract emotional and social connection with its appeal. And for Japan, the source is often a polite narrator or a respectful family interaction. So they try to combine nostalgia, tradition, and sensory description to create a trustworthy and desirable image. So directness of message, Malaysia is very direct and explicit. The message is to buy and enjoy KFC with your family members, with your friends, with anybody close to you, with direct calls, for example, like jom makan KFC. But for Japan, it is very indirect and suggestive. So it is woven in and written into their advertisements to have a call to action, but in a subtle way. For example, celebrate this Christmas with KFC, or they talk about a 1,000 yen pack that you can use to buy the KFC pack. So it is not directly into your face, like let's go buy a KFC, but they will intertwine it with, for example, celebrate this Christmas with KFC. Next.
So next, turning to our findings for research question 2. So we analyze how KFC advertisements reflect cultural values and communication styles in Malaysia and Japan. So these findings are based on the videos we have transcribed, and the results are summarized in the table shown. So after observing the table, the Malaysian advertisements highlights more on social bonding and collective enjoyment through lively and friendly communications, whereas Japanese ads emphasizes more on harmony, formality, and respect with polite and controlled communication. So overall, these differences clearly demonstrates how advertisements adapt language, tone, emotional display, and interaction style to local cultural norms, as illustrated in the table based on our video transcription. Next.
We're moving on to discussion of key findings. So let's first look at Malaysian advertisements through the lens of the Yale model. So Malaysian ads often feature as friendly, relatable sources and use an upbeat tone to create emotional and social connections. So this aligns with the collectivist nature of Malaysian culture, enhancing the ads persuasive effectiveness. While Japanese ads show a different approach, they use calm, polite, and subtle messaging, often emphasizing product quality and harmony. So here, persuasion is more effective when the message delivery matches audience expectations. So from the perspective of scholars' theory, cultural differences are also evident. For Japanese ads are high context. Usually they rely on heavily on visuals, non-verbal cues, and the overall atmosphere. While for Malaysian ads, on the other hand, are lower context, using explicit verbal communication, humor, and direct messaging. Next. Okay, so for implications, these findings suggest that persuasion is deeply shaped by cultural communication styles. So in Malaysia, direct and emotional messaging resonates more, while in Japan, subtly and indirect cues are preferred. So this supports both the Yale attitude change model and Scotland's intercultural communication theory, showing that advertising is most effective when it aligns with cultural expectations. So for global brands, this highlights the importance of localizing advertisements rather than relying solely on standardized the global messages. So next, for recommendation, based on our study, we recommend several steps for future research. First, we analyzing a larger set of advertisements, or including other fast food brands, could provide broader cross-cultural insights. And for the second one is exploring digital and social media advertisements could reveal different persuasive and cultural patterns. And the third one is conducting audience-based studies such as surveys, interviews, or focus groups would help understand how viewers from different cultures interpret the ads. So finally, we comparing responses from younger and older audiences could shed light on generational differences in advertising effectiveness. Okay, next. Okay, so for conclusion, our study shows that persuasive advertising is strongly influenced by cultural norms and communication styles. KFC's Malaysian ads rely oriented themes and direct expressions, while Japanese ads they adopt a calmer, more subtle approach that reflects harmony and indirect communication. So this finding supports scholars' intercultural communication theory, demonstrating how cultural values shape message interpretation. So by adapting advertisements to the communication patterns of each country, KFC exemplifies effective localization in global marketing. So next. Okay, so that's all from our group. Thank you.